Tension, are you recording? 7, tension seeks resolution. Oscillation versus resolution. A, one basic principle found throughout nature is this: tension seeks resolution. From the spider web to the human body, from the formation of galaxies to the shifts of continents, from the swing of pendulums to the movement of wind-up toys, tension resolution systems are in play. We can observe in nature and in our lives both simple and complex tension resolution systems that influence not only the changes that occur, but how those changes will occur. The simplest tension resolution system is a structure that contains a single tension. The tendency of the structure is to resolve the tension. If you stretch a rubber band, the tendency of the rubber band is to pull back to resolve the tension in the structure. A compressed coiled spring has a tendency to release the tension by springing back towards its original state. B, the path of least resistance oscillates in some structures and resolves in others. If you are in an oscillating structure, you will experience a recurring pattern. This is a pattern that moves toward what you want and then away from what you want, and then toward what you want, and then away from what you want, and so on. If you are in a structure that resolves the path of least resistance, the path of least resistance moves towards final resolution of the structure. One major skill of the creative process is forming structures that resolve in favor of the creation. These structures are the most useful because they support movement in the direction of your final result. Oscillation. The structure in some people's lives lead to oscillation. These people have a general experience of moving forward and then backward and then forward and then backward again. This pattern may repeat endlessly. Because of the structure in play, their attempt to change their life may work at first and then not work, and then work again. This is the experience of coming full circle, the feeling of being in a rut, of winding up back at square one. If you are in a structure that leads to oscillation, no solution will help. This is because these psychological solutions do not address the structure, but rather the behavior that comes from the structure. To attempt a psychological solution to what is really a structural phenomenon does nothing to change the underlying structure. The structure is upstream of behavior, psychology, habits, impacting everything. Change the structure and change comes naturally, effortlessly. D, structural conflict. Structural conflict comes from two simple tension resolution systems that compete. If you are hungry, tension, you would naturally tend to resolve this tension by eating, resolution. However, if you are sufficiently overweight, you may choose to go on a diet designed to bring you to a desirable weight. This sets up a separate system of tension resolution. The simple tension resolution system of hungry eat and overweight not eat are tied together, but they are in conflict. You cannot simultaneously resolve both tensions. That is, you cannot eat and not eat at the same time. On the level of appearance, many dieters seem to be taking action to achieve what they ultimately want, to lose weight. On the level of structure, however, their actions are designed to resolve a structural conflict. Because of the structure in play, while they may temporarily lose weight, the path of least resistance will eventually lead them to regain the weight they lose. But once they become overweight again, the path of least resistance will be to return to their diet. This shift from tension resolution systems this shift from one tension resolution system dictating the action to the other tension resolution system dictating the action. This may be called a shift of dominance. These shifts of dominance form the behavior of oscillation. The force in play may not be obvious. In fact, the dieter may wonder why it is sometimes easier to diet than other times. The structure itself leads to oscillation. This is all it can do. As you put pressure on one part of a structure, the rest of the structure pushes back. In system dynamics, this is called compensating feedback. You will fail not because you have some deep-seated self-destructive urge, or because you actually want to fail, but because you are moving along the path of least resistance formed by the structure in play. Obviously, the path of least resistance now leads back towards the front wall, towards the result you desire. Over time, you will tend to continue to move back, forth, toward one wall and then towards the other, as the path of least resistance changes. These shifts may take minutes or years. When we do get what we want, sometimes, we may not see it as a direct result of our efforts. We will let our failure to achieve something reinforce our feeling that we cannot have it or don't deserve it. This assumption can be an invisible policy that goes unexamined throughout our lives. Within inevitability, there are events that are not inevitable. Part of the creative process is learning how to make choices that lead to consequences you favor. When you create, you are taking action in a realm that is non-evitable, non-fixed, open, and subject to your actions. People both want to create what most deeply matters to them and simultaneously believe deep down that they cannot have what they want. This very human dilemma is actually a structural conflict. Structural conflict is not resolvable. Structural conflict may be defined as two or more tension resolution systems in which the points of resolution are mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive points of resolution are not resolvable, either simultaneously or sequentially. Structural conflict operates at a completely different level from that, which is colloquially thought of as emotional conflict. Emotional conflict operates primarily at the level of feeling and is experienced in such forms as anxiety, confusion, frustration, or contradictory emotions, such as love and hate for the same person. Structural conflict operates at the deeper life orientation level. It may give rise to these emotions or to a wider range of other emotions, from inner peace, lightness, and overwhelming joy, to apathy, heaviness, and depression. Your emotions are often generated by the structure you are in. The actions you take to avoid unwanted emotions or to foster wanted emotions do nothing to change the structure causing the emotions. Therefore, these actions do not succeed. You also have a structural tendency to attempt to resolve a structural conflict. It is natural to continue trying to resolve a structural conflict, even though the conflict is not resolvable. Designs do not always accomplish what they are intended to accomplish. People often try to circumvent the effects of structural conflict with great hope and optimism, which is usually followed by great disillusionment. It is inherent in this structure that any actions you take to solve structural conflict only reinforce the experience of limitation, and hence the structure itself. Since the nature of this conflict is structural, it is only by changing the underlying structure of your life that you can make any real and lasting change. However, any attempt you make to change the structure from within this structure will not work. Because of the structure in play, the path of least resistance will lead you to futile actions designed to relieve the conflict, but that ironically will only entrench the conflict further. In fact, if you are in structural conflict, you will develop strategies to compensate for the inability of the structure to support final resolution. The nature of creating generates a completely different structure, but creating is not a solution to structural conflict. It is independent and unrelated to structural conflict. It does not oscillate. To carry on,